Alright, so welcome back. We are going to continue to listen to wisdom of Saint Theodoros the Great, and we start with text number 30. I don't know which page. Okay, you will find it.
Okay.
All right.
Do not let anger and wrath make their home in you, for an angry man is not dignified, whereas wisdom dwells in the hearts of the gentle. If the passion of anger dominates your soul, those who live in the world will prove to be better than you, and you will be put to shame as unworthy of monastic solitude.
Very interesting, counsel, and it might seem to us strange that he addressed these words, this advice to monks who decided to spend a life in solitude. Probably we would not expect this advice for this state of or way of life. But true is that it is appropriate, and even this counsel can help us to understand state of our or these movements in our soul during some days. We have to understand that everybody who makes decision and for some kind of radicalism in spiritual life, who makes decision that yes, I want walk on this path to salvation. Usually, in the beginning, the zeal which brings this decision causes that the zeal that we are full of excitement. Many these spiritual writers, they call it that it is sweetness, that person experiences some kind of sweetness of this life, and it is like full of joy and excitement, happiness, and the person is able to do big things for God, and he is able to deny himself in very almost extreme ways, but it's not healthy. He should follow advice of his or her spiritual father. But after this sweetness, which is in the beginning of spiritual life, after this sweetness, something comes what is more bitter. And there are many things, but with connection with this advice from St. Theodoros, we can concentrate on one aspect of this bitterness or some kind of difficulty. When we start to live this spiritual life, it is connected that not only with this sweetness, but slowly we start to see what is in our heart with some kind of clear vision. We can see that what we are. It was on Saturday, I was talking, or on Sunday, about that man who, or on feast, I don't remember now.
On Saturday.
On Saturday.
Yeah.
I didn't use it on Sunday because baptism. I was talking about one man who asked for a book for spiritual life. And after a few days, because he wanted to grow spiritually, after a few days he came back and he returned the book to priest, with words that's too much. He cannot do this. Because first pages of that book pointed something that was corrupted in his soul, and he realized this is so huge that he lost courage He said, I'm not able to conquer this bad habit or whatever it was in me. So, and because he gave up, he even didn't want to continue the book. Probably he was scared. What can he uncover in his heart? And this is happening when we make this decision. God takes it seriously. And I heard this comparison that God acts like bulldozer at the moment. When we make decision for deeper spiritual life, he said, okay, and he comes and demolishes everything what we built already in our heart, or a way of life, a way of thinking, and he leaves only foundation, if there are some. But many times it seems that, well, everything was wrong what we were doing. And it is very unpleasant. People who are not prepared for that can lose hope. This is why Simeon, a new theologian, says that his advice is somebody comes to believe, that one of the first steps the person must do is to find spiritual father, to somebody who would help him go through this, not only to begin but continue, because if a person is left by himself or herself, I think that very easily the person can lose this zeal, this courage, and everything, because he would not understand what is going on. This movement is caused by our pride, which is rooted somehow in our souls. Even we say, well, we are not prideful, but well, if we read, for example, gospel or work of saints about spiritual life, we very quickly find that there are in our life there are these moments when which are not in accord with this, and this causes tension in our heart, because it's difficult at first to admit that we were wrong, there's something wrong. This pride starts to fight against this, and that how it is practically visible in our lives is that we become nervous and angry. You know, this is two signs that, well, there was a documentary, a movie about, or short show, I think on YouTube I saw that, or somewhere else. It's not important. But that documentary was about a man who wanted to try to live for 2 weeks as a monk who lives in solitude. So he approached this igumen, the superior of one monastery, somewhere in desert. I don't remember where it was, but well, anyway. So, and they made arrangements. So the superior, when he arrived, that man, superior took him to that cave or this place where these monks usually stay, with that one which was empty, somebody lived at, and he provided for him enough necessary food for those 2 weeks, and he gave several advices, and he left him, and he was there alone for 2 weeks. And he was, every day he made commentary to his camera that what was going on, you know. And first day he was joyful, great, the silence is wonderful, and then it was oh, this is great. But what was interesting, I don't want to go through whole this process he experienced, but it was 4th or 5th day, he made this comment that he was angry all day. He was full of anger. That even one of the stones was bothering him, so he kicked this somewhere far, and then he caused pain to his feet. But he couldn't explain that why is that. He was relatively fasting. He was keeping that prayer rule that superior gave him. He was keeping these advices, how to spend day. He was following this rule, and he expected like paradise. And he couldn't explain. He couldn't understand why he is filled with this nervosity and anger, and nobody was there, nobody bothered him, nothing. And this was very interesting to hear that. But what happened, he really entered this solitude, this silence, following the rule of prayer. So what happened was that he started to realize what is broken inside of him. And this anger is the result of that pride which kept him to make some kind of deeper conversion. Pride which wanted to keep this old way of life, didn't want to give up on that. And this is what made this very difficult state inside of soul. Now, this is why Saint Theodoros says that don't allow that anger and hate to make a dwelling in your heart. Because if the monk would allow that to stay in this, allow himself to stay in this state, so then what kind of profit would have his monastic work, monastic life? Even people in the world would be better than he is. And so this is why he why we have to realize that when we are trying to go deeper to spiritual life, that we will encounter the same thing, same state of soul, even maybe not in this intensity, like these monks who are alone, but still it will be. And we have to know about that this is the mechanism of soul, this or spiritual law. We have to expect that it will be, and we have to be ready for that. And in these moments, when it comes, we have to spend time in prayer, asking, begging for help. Because otherwise we can stay in this bitterness and nothing will happen to us. No change, no transformation. But this bitterness can really lead us to even worse state, which is some kind of state when heart becomes like a rock, and we will be fulfilling some kind of rule, but it will be without spirit, it will be just Pharisaism. Okay. So this is what we are supposed. We have to know about that and to be ready for it. We should not be surprised that this can happen, and we can test it. That if we go to our past, and I would be wrong that you are able to find these moments always when you make some kind of significant step forward in spiritual life, that you experience something like that, and it doesn't make sense. like we are confused because we expect, okay, I did something wrong, and I did something very good in for a spiritual life. Suddenly, it seems that my state of my soul is even worse, and I don't know why. And yeah, I experience it very often when I'm driving. A lot of nervosity sometimes. When we went to Pittsburgh last time to visit Miran and Sarah, and so we started. It was Sunday, so we went and meet in Akron. It was like mess on the roads, and I thought, why all those people, those crazy people, decided to go to Pittsburgh when we are going? And then when we were leaving from Pittsburgh, someone said, "Oh, you can stay a little bit longer." I said, "No. Those people are planning to return back, so I want to go ahead." It's a joke, but sometimes you have these states, especially, you can experience even like these changes during the day, that if you spend like morning like in good prayer and you read something, you will feel like inner joy, that you were fed spiritually, and it is something to touch almost always. Then something's coming, something similar I described. That like everything can become like obstacle or source of some kind of strange nervosity or anger. Even like innocent little stone on paths is problem. Okay, I talked too much about it. So keep this is good, very good advice he gives. Let's continue.
In every trial and in all warfare, use prayer as your invincible weapon, and by the grace of Christ you will be victorious. Let your prayer be pure, as our wise teacher counsels. For he says, "I would have men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands, without anger and without quarrelling." But the person who neglects such prayer will be delivered over to trials and passions.
Well, we know already when we from Brianchen, and we talk about that these trials and tests are non-stop present in our life, and so this is why we should see that as we should understand that they come only with God's permission to our life. Nothing happens without God's permission. And Holy Fathers, because of that, they always were talking about these trials and difficulties, crises and crosses. They saw it as an opportunity for growth, that God visits them with that. Say, may they practice virtues, which will help them to grow in virtuous life. And another thing is that if we recognize this, our weakness of our soul in the middle of these trials, so if for Christian this recognition of this weakness leads towards more intensive prayer and spiritual life, because we know that this is something what God allowed, and if He allowed this, it is for our salvation, is good for us, and we beg for help. So it is it is something what should come like natural thing for us to react with prayer for help. Samuel?
It's very different from, Father David often talks about how this translates into psychology, but it's very different from a modern psychologist approach, because if you listen to someone like Jordan Peterson, he waxes very eloquent talking about how complex the psychological state is, and using anger and pride as like a form of protection for the psyche, and so we're just reacting to our environment. It's very man versus wild type of mentality, and it just strikes me how differently is the wisdom of the fathers, and that the response should be one of prayer and deepening of the spiritual life in response to our pride being hurt or becoming angry.
A good point.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't make somehow inner decision to really commit your life to Christ, as we heard yesterday during exorcism. So if we don't make this decision, or deeper decision, and if we don't start to really look to gospel and to accept the gospel as this God's instruction how to live, until we don't do this, so then we have to use this, as you said, these concepts, to somehow to find way how to live in this world. And until we don't make this really deep, absolute decision, I would say, it's very difficult to accept that trials and difficulties and crosses might be those good instructors God sends for us to help us to grow. So I think that people in the world, they don't have other way just to use it, as you said, that this, to find some kind of explanation or protection. It's difficult. But for us Christians, it is we know that we are poor. We lost paradise. The fall destroyed this beauty which was given by God to us. We lost that. And we are trying to gain back, walking on the path Christ showed us. But we are realizing that we are beggars. And what is natural for beggar is to beg. So we really turn to God with this understanding that, we cannot do anything by ourselves, but we need His help, that we need His grace, we need Him. And this is done through prayer. And it is very interesting what he says in the end. I have to find this last sentence, 31.
But the person who neglects such prayer will be delivered over to trials and passions.
Yes. What he says is very interesting, and you pay attention, that if we neglect in these trials and crosses, if we neglect to turn to God in prayer, to ask Him for help, because it should lead us towards Him, so then we be delivered to bigger trials and difficulties. And it is something what is worthy to remember too, because uh, especially when like these difficulties are multiplying in our lives, we should think that, well, how did we react with these first ones? Did we turn to God? Did we somehow, with humility, approach Him, asking for help? Did we learn what He was trying to teach us through these first easy difficulties? Because one thing is for sure, and He is fighting for us. God wishes our salvation. How God wishes us to come back to Him. He wishes to give us eternal life. So until our last breath, He will be fighting for us. And many times, I think that this romantic somehow image we are infected by this is that, well, it is some kind of this God's fight for us and help for us, so that it comes very sweet, nice way, and we are overwhelmed by love. And well, it happens many times in these higher levels of spiritual life, and God's grace visits us in visions, and we taste this foretaste of heaven somehow. But on the way of purification, it is in through trials and crosses, because only those have power to break this wall which is in our heart, which causes that the grace cannot really touch the center of heart, if I start this way. So again, if we experience like these trials which are growing or bigger intensity, you have to go back and maybe to look how did we reacted on those trials which came before. Because many times we are what we do is, I can handle that, I can survive that, I can go through, and we somehow make ourselves like heroes, that we stand against that, we survive, we suffer through, but it is not the way how we should go through. Yes, we should go through these trials with patience, but not without, but not counting on our strength or some kind of ignorance to this problem. We shouldn't go through these trials like these trials should lead us towards God. Yes, what we are supposed to do, we are supposed to do what we can do is our strength, but this movement towards God is important. So Isaac Syrian, he says very nicely in one place that I don't know if I can offer exact words, but he said that we should start to build our ark before the flood. So it means that we have to beg God even for grace to maybe are able to turn to Him in the time of crisis and make this preparation. Hi, Lucia. A question, some or nothing? Good. So 32.
Okay. Wine makes glad the heart of man, but you who have professed sorrow and grief should turn away from such gladness and rejoice in spiritual gifts. If you rejoice in wine, You will live with shameful thoughts, and distress will overwhelm you.
Well, not good news for those who like wine. Okay. There are difficulties, guys. They take everything what is good. But we have to understand it correctly. Not correct. Yes, correctly. He says, but you who have professed sorrow and grief. So he's talking about monks. There is in Syriac language, name from monk is that one who cries, or who is like overwhelmed with sorrow. So then the word monk means that. So this is why he said that you who have professed sorrow and grief. So he's turning towards those who started their monastic vocation, and those are expected to turn away from this pleasure which wine brings, because they are supposed to rejoice in spiritual gifts, not in things which come from this world. And he gives like warning that, well, if you leave this pleasure in your life, so then you will be living without peace, and you will be living with shameful thoughts. And this is again some kind of spiritual law. What can we expect if we do this? It's like they give us many of these explanation of these mechanisms which rule in our souls. But for sure, when we are listening to these counsels, we know that we cannot in fullness follow all these rules which are for monks. But this instruction, well, we can do this. We can do this. And we can renounce these pleasures, bodily pleasures. It's not about wine, it's about many things. And in order to be open more for pleasures which are coming from heaven, from above. And it is something what is difficult to digest for people from the world, because they don't understand this. I remember when it was first book translated about these elders from Mount Athos to Slovak language. We were still in our first page, very early. It was about not big book about Pisces from Mount Athos in Pisces. And when I read this, it was like eyes opening. We didn't have access to all this like teaching of Holy Fathers, life of Holy Fathers. It was like first book I read, and I was taken by that. But I remember when I came to part when they were describing like this some kind of details how he lived, and there was like one thing that somebody gave him like jar of jam.
To make jam.
Yeah, jelly. And when the person returned back to visit him, he saw this jar of jelly filled. In the jelly there was like this cucumber, carrots, whatever, and very totally different tastes. So the person, he totally damaged the jelly. And if he eats that, so he doesn't have any pleasure from jelly, and he has no pleasure from this cucumber or other this stuff he puts there. And it was like upset, and for me it was, this is strange. It's like horrible. But then, reading this work of Holy Fathers, I started to understand that what he did. He, for sure, he did it not from some kind of extravagancy and showing off. He was aware that because he had like these lofty states of soul, and so he was aware that if he allows himself something from pleasure from this world, he would lose what he was getting in these visions and states of grace he experienced. And I think that the world cannot understand this. And even for us, it might be strange if we willingly do the same thing. And I have to admit, I am talking about this part because from the time, almost always, when I add some kind of spices to meal which is in front of me to make it more tasty, it comes very often to my mind that spicy would do something totally different, and I feel bad. I cannot help myself. But sometimes I conquer that, and then I'm crying out this food, forcing myself. Okay, but well. So it is difficult. It is very difficult, but I think that even, as I said, that I have this difficulty with food, that it has to be spiced correctly, and but even if I'm not able to, many times to resist, but this memory somehow makes this food like bitter a little bit, and it takes away a little bit of that pleasure. But I think that we got the meaning. There are some questions about that? No, it's easy, isn't it? No.
What I think about is when you're talking about the jelly and the cucumbers and everything is the sweetness of prayer and the bitterness of trials.
Yeah. There are many these examples. A few months ago I read about a monk who was making baskets from some kind of type of palm these leaves, and but before you had to cook these leaves before you make this. So he was cooking these leaves in his cell, and he never changed the water, only once per year. So water, he was just adding water, but this water was giving so bad smell that nobody wanted to visit him because of that, and he spent whole day there. And he said, well, this is how I am doing repentance for all pleasure of my previous life by enduring this bad smell. Extreme, but it worked for him. For sure, not all monks followed his example, but he found his way how to become free from that and to open more for the spiritual gifts, this was always pushing him to concentrate on these spiritual things. Well, I think that his practice didn't become like common among all monks, but many of them, they found their own ways how to conquer that desire for pleasures of this world. And I think it is up to us to search how can we, in correct way, appropriate way, we should visit how we can practice that. And with this thought that, well, I am giving up of this because I want something what is higher. Pleasure, I don't want to be satisfied with this pleasure. Because I expect this pleasure from spiritual gifts. I agree with you, it's very hard. It's very hard. But remember, Christianity is only for heroes. You know, only for heroes. Let's go take something easier. Oh, it's not easier. Sorry. All right, 33.
Okay. Sorry. Do not plan to spend feast days in drinking wine, but in regenerating your intellect and purifying your soul. If you eat gluttonously and drink wine, you'll provoke anger in the person whom the feast is honoring. Wow.
Yeah. Tough. Tough thing, but well, we don't need to think too much about that, and we can discover wisdom there. And he really captured there what is going on in our minds. You know, like just very good example is like Great Fast, and how it is like when this preparation for the Pascha starts, and people are searching for good sausage, good ham, and they are planning this what we are going to have on Pascha as a food after this 50 days of fasting, and we start to look forward how we enjoy that food, how we enjoy this freedom from fast which comes. And even if it is not like too radical, but well, in some way we are planning that, okay, final Pascha will some relief, it will be easier, and well, so I don't need to be so strict. But what we are planning is actually something actually what we are doing at the time, we are planning to destroy everything we built during these 50 days. You know, because the Great Fast and this fasting and difficulty, this built something in us. And we usually take this way, okay, the Great Fast is over, now I can return back to normal way. Well, normal way of diet, maybe. But with this setting of soul, we are even destroying even those who we gain. And so we should not plan to spend these festal days by drinking of wine. He means that these are planned for this easiest way of our spiritual life, that strictness is away. This destroys everything. And maybe I told this story before sometime, that there was a man who decided, I know him, that he decided to spend like whole great fast in very strict way, strict fasting. We have to understand that there was like in Slovakia during communists, and because of some kind of Latinization, it means that a lot from Latin spirituality was pushed on us and forced us to follow. It was presented to us as a correct way, and well, nothing like these words of this great teacher of spiritual life are not available in Slovak language. So I grew up in the way that fasting, the great fast, was very strict in our family of priests. It's very strict. It means that whole first week without meat. Then Wednesday and Friday fasting from meat, and whole like this great week without meat. And it was something like, it was like big thing, because usually what we followed, this Latin, or was given us, this discipline church gave us, was you are fasting on first day of the great fast, very strict on Great Friday, and then Wednesday, Fridays without meat. So we did something more extra, and there were plus other things. So we thought, wow, we did something. But first, like fast, when it was really strict without meat, was in when we went to our first parish, and I said, well, will we try? So I agreed, so we tried. And we tried it, and we were talking, and no TV, no social medias, nothing, no media. And when we told about that to our neighbor. She was principal in school. And she said, well, this is a good idea. I will go with my family too. So she followed. And in the end of Great Fast, she told me, you know what, this was great. We didn't watch TV. You know what, during this Great Fast, I put whole house to order. It was needed. I went through all these cabinets, everything. I put. I told myself, well, it's not the point, you know, of the Great Fast, you know, but at least she tried. So if I am just describing that how situation was, so that man who really tried to go very strict, in all of us, it was something really rare. And he did it. And then he was planning that on Sunday, that Sunday of Pascha, that he will like celebrate. His family was looking forward to this, and he told me that on Saturday, still only started like hours to the liturgy, because it was the end of this horrible time of strict fast. And he said on Sunday morning, he told himself, I did it. Also, it was like, I am the man, you know, I conquered myself. And he said, I did it. Also, it was a great feeling. And what happened was that almost immediately after that, he had conflict with his wife. So he went to church very angry. And he said, I didn't enjoy liturgy. It was like this anger from this conflict was like buzzing in my head. It was horrible. And I was so upset that he said, after liturgy, he said, I'm not going home now immediately. No, I said, I wanted to punish my wife for that what she did, and so he decided that they can start lunch without me, and so he went to bar, and I'm going to have a drink and spend some time, then I will go home. Well, it was not one drink, he said, one drink, another drink. He said, I got so drunk. Then I came home, and I was like that. The next day he was like full of shame. Full of shame. Because, and he told, next day he realized that it was his pride. He was doing all this great stuff because of, he wanted to show himself that he's able to do this. That it was, am I right, Helen? You beautiful baby, you are listening so carefully. You are learning these things, yes? So you are going to be holy girl and holy lady. Yes, smiling. You are angel, right? So he realized that he tasted some kind of bad fruit from his bad intention he had. So, because, and I think it was connected with that for sure he was planning that day to enjoy in fullness what he didn't eat or drink during all these 50 days. And like Saint Theodoros, he teaches us that we should not plan this. We should plan to spend these big feasts, which are coming after this season, with things which help us to regenerate our soul and heart. So it means that we should plan this. We should plan that, we will spend these festival days, but with this tasting of this spiritual joy, and to be preparing for that. And this would be some kind of protection against like this falls. Oh, difficult. Even these things. I'm surprised that you want to listen to these guys.
No.
They are like very, very strange, and they are taking everything from us. But the reason is because they want to bring us to bigger pleasures and bigger gifts. And it is always worth it to follow their advice. All right, we will stop here.